Signore e signori, buonasera. Welcome to New York University, Casa Italiana, zerilli-marimò. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all here tonight for the presentation of the English translation of Antonio Monda's book, Unworthy. It's also a great pleasure to welcome for the first time in her official capacity here in New York, the Ambassador of Italy to the United Nations, Mariangela Zappia. Please welcome her on our behalf. It's the first time that Italy is represented in what is probably the most important diplomatic post by a woman, and by a woman with a wonderful experience behind her back. And we are delighted that she's serving Italy in that role and that she's here with us tonight. Thank you, Ambassador. Some of you might have been here and we presented the Italian edition, the Italian publication of L'Indegno by Antonio Monda. And you know that he talks about a priest that has some trouble maintaining his vows. In New York in the 70s, let's put it this way, a lot of people, a lot of troubles maintaining any kind of thing in New York in the 70s. And as you might know, this is part of a big work that Antonio is working on. It's a decalogue almost. It's a work comprised of 10 books eventually when it's going to be completed. The 7th one, in order, is going to be published in March in Italy. And each book is dedicated to a decade of the 20th century in New York. So the specific book we are presenting tonight talks about the 70s, and there's as a centerpiece, center figure, this priest. Now to introduce briefly to you our guest for the evening, Antonio, I'm not going to introduce anymore. You have already heard what I had to say about him. We have with us Mary Karr. Please welcome her. Mary is an award-winning poet and best-selling memoirist. She's the author of the critically acclaimed New York Times best-selling memoirs, The Liars Club, Cherry, and Lit. Her most recent book is a collection of poems called Tropic of Squalor. A few days ago, she appeared on the first page of L'Osservatore Romano. How many of you have been on the pages of L'Osservatore Romano?
Below the fold.
And also with us, we had Father James Martin. Please welcome Father James Martin. Father Martin is an editor-at-large of American Magazine. He's an accomplished author. I'm going to give you the names of some of his books, but many of you might know him as the chaplain to the Colbert Nation. And he's, and I would say that because I'm one of his parishioners in his virtual parish, that is Facebook and Instagram. And he has a large following, and he's one of the priests that uses the social media with more intelligence, tact, and depth. So I invite all of you to follow what he does on the social media, because that's a very important part of his apostolate. Among the books published by Father James, I would like to remind you the most recent ones. The last one is Building a Bridge, How the Catholic Church and the LGBT community can enter into a relationship of respect, compassion, and sensitivity. As you can imagine, this book caused Father Martin a great deal of recognition and affection and respect, but also some trouble in some circles to a certain side of the Catholic Church. He doesn't seem to be affected at all by them. And we are very happy that he's not. And he is also the author of a novel called The Abbey, A Story of Discovery. And one that I really like a lot is The Jesuit Guide. What is it? The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything. And without further ado, I would like now to ask you to please welcome Antonio Monda.
Good to see you.
Can
I say just one thing about the play?
Yes.
First of all, thank you. I don't know the film, but it looks like a wonderful film. I say some friends from the Criterion. Give a look at this film. And he won the second prize, I think, in Berlin. Yeah. A friend of mine who happened to be a very important filmmaker once told me that I should always, hold on, I don't know how to turn it on. I should always look at the second prize, because this is always the best. Because juries tend to find a compromise for the winner, while the second is always with few exceptions, of course, the best. The second thing that this film reminded me is that there was a time where French films were very good. And the third time, the thing is, it also reminded me that there was a conversation between Mary McCarthy and Flannery O'Connor about communion. And Flannery O'Connor, I'm sure you know that, responded, I don't know if it's the right quote, if communion is just a symbol, who cares? She believed, as a Catholic, believed that it's the blood of Christ. That's it. Now we can read.
Well, with that perky introduction, I thought I would read from a little section of the book because I felt like it. Father Abram, the priest in question, sins about every way he can, and this is his sort of pondering of that. There was a second when I was afraid I wouldn't have the strength to weep anymore, or to take delight in anything either. Such a state is death, I know. And I ask myself, how is it possible? What have I done to become what I've become? What's happened to me? I believe in the devil, even though I can't imagine him. And I'm sure I see him every day on the street, in church, in the mirror. I see him in the noises of this city, born to welcome and to punish, in its desperate energy, its desolation, and the smoke that rises from its streets, its glittering neon, and the sudden, unexpected whiffs of the sea. I see him in Lisa's naked body, which was created by God, who loves us both, in her perfect breast and her mother-of-pearl skin. And I see him in her love for me, which is as sincere as pain, and which I have condemned to incompletion. I also believe in hell, and I can't imagine it either. A deafening silence, perhaps, and the eternal void. Sometimes I think hell is death, and only those who deserve to go there disappear forever. Or maybe not. Maybe you never die, and hell's the way I imagined it as a child, a place where our sinful bodies suffer grievous torments. Nothing frightens me more than solitude. And when I chose to dedicate my life to God, I believed my defense against being alone would be to sense his presence at my side, and that my choice would give me the only strength that's of any use in this life. But the flesh is weak. Christ himself taught us that, and I wonder how often he saw it verified in his own body. No day passes when I don't think about that, when I sin, when I betray him, when I discover that my spirit isn't all that strong either. Leave me in peace, I feel like shouting at him. Leave me in peace. And then I start arguing with him, insulting him, demanding to be sent there immediately to this hell of his, because it just can't be as bad as all that, especially if Lisa's there too. There's no telling how many people I failed to save from that torment. There's no telling how many people to whose damnation I have contributed through my unworthy example, starting with Lisa. And I ask you, why, our Father who art in heaven, whom I continue to love even at this moment, why? A father must help his son.
Grazie. When you read that sexy passage, my son was laughing, so I felt embarrassed.
Where is Ignazio?
He's there.
Oh boy, I've done such terrible things to my own son who's in this very room. You guys should meet and plan an assassination.
Let me go straight to the point. That is not Father Singer, that's the name of my character, speaking, it's me. I believe in the devil, and I do believe in hell. And since I already quoted Flannery O'Connor, let me use a second quote from my favorite living writer, Cormac McCarthy. If there is no hell, there will be no heaven. I do believe in heaven, and I do believe in hell, and I do believe in the devil. I know there is a friend of mine here who is laughing because he told me one of the funniest things about the devil. Alas,
the devil does not exist. And I'm afraid it does.
That's pretty much what Father Martin and I had to ask you about, and now we're done.
You know, it's like, here we go. It's the old saying that the devil's greatest trick in the 20th century is convincing people that he doesn't exist. Let me ask you a little bit about the sort of research for the book. I found the character of the priest, Father Abram, very well drawn and very
Thank you.
realistic. Yes. Where did you do? By the way, it's not based on me, just so you know.
It's based on me.
So he says.
Where did you do your research? Because particularly the scenes in the rectory I found very convincing.
Okay, let me very briefly say what this book is about. It's about a priest who has a Jewish name, Abram Singer, who falls in love for a woman. First of all, he has several mistresses. And then he falls in love for a woman. Her name is Lisa. But he's a good priest. He believes in Jesus. He believes in the church. And he's tormented. He doesn't know what to do. I stop here because there several things happen, but this is basically what this book is about. It's clear now, I believe, that I'm an observant Catholic. I know very well those places, those priests. Of course, when I was a kid, I was in Rome, so the description, it's a translation from my experience in Rome. And there are also a couple of inventions. My favorite moment in the book, it's completely invented, is about a group of priests watching on television the Muhammad Ali-George Foreman fight, the famous Rumble in the Jungle. I don't know, of course, I don't know if something like that happened in a yeah. But I try to imagine how a group of priests would react to that. And the nuns who are serving the food to the priests. And it's pure invention, but I think probably that's why it's the best, in my opinion, of the book. So there is not a lot of research, besides the fact that I was too young to know very well New York in the 70s. But it was a very, let me use the third quote of the night. I love this dirty town, which is from Sweet Smell of Success. It was a very dirty, corrupt, live, energetic city.
In the book, I'm wondering if are you portraying him as a sympathetic character largely? He comes across as sympathetic, but by the same token, he doesn't seem to be, in my sense, kind of trying very hard to kind of break his attachment to Lisa. So I'm wondering, I mean, it's interesting you say he's a good priest, and I'm just curious.
I don't know. You're the expert on being a good priest.
Oh, you're a Catholic too.
Okay. In the book, I tried to give him a couple of talents. Good sermons and good confessions. At least people who go to confess to Father Abram seems to be very happy and very relieved. People who listen to his sermons seems to be changed somehow. So this, I think, make him a decent priest, if not a good priest. Am I sympathetic? More than that, I love this guy. I totally empathize and sympathize with him. It's a self-portrait, come on.
Did you ever consider going into the priesthood?
I don't have that courage. I think it's an act of courage, and I do not have. I'm weak, I'm frail, but I admire when the priest is good, of course, when someone does it, yeah. And I would say the same about the nuns, of course. It's an act of extreme courage.
You know, I was struck by the fact that he steals, too. I don't want to give too much away in the novel, but he steals. And it reminded me, in religious life, we take 3 vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. And my novice director said to me once, when you are breaking, which I really like seeing in the book, when you break one vow in a big way, you're usually breaking the other 2.
Which is what happens in the book. Okay, I can spoil this one thing. He's in love, and he's not rich. He needs money, so he steals from for the collection to buy gifts to his lover.
But that's not the worst.
I didn't
of
do
it.
that.
But that's not the worst of it.
Of course, it's the beginning.
Right. That's the beginning of some of the worst.
Yeah. And since I mentioned before Cormac McCarthy, all my books appear to be very bleak, but at the very end there is always a little shine, a little light. I think McCarthy.
Now, why did you set this particular book in the 70s? Was because his life is kind of out of control, or?
Yes, I wanted to see New York at its most fascinating, but also at its dirtiest. And I think that was the time. There is a moment, which is, I think, interesting, at least to me, where Father Abram walks through town. It is in 54th Street. And he sees a young, wonderful, gorgeous woman riding a white horse and entering a club. It's Bianca Jagger going to the Studio 54. He doesn't even know what Studio 54 is. But she's fascinating. And there is this crazy contrast between this priest who is going back to church and this wonderful woman entering the nightclub.
Is his, I guess I wanted to ask, in a way, sort of what Jim was already asking, is his vocation for you is 100% real, or?
Yes. In the book, he first contemplates to commit suicide.
Before he becomes a priest.
Before he becomes a priest. This is a book about extreme choices and the balance between the mediocrity and fallacy of our flesh and the greatness of our ambition, of our mission, if you want, which is the theme that records in all my books. Fallacy of us and our flesh and the greatness of the rest, but also the beauty of the rest.
I think carnality gets a bad rap in this book. I mean, I think there's
No.
I mean, I'm serious. I think the flesh has a lot going for it.
There is a lot of sex.
Has a lot to recommend it. Yeah, but it's not all just between your waist and your knees. There's a lot more to it, to what we're stuck with. I wanted to know if people knew. He seemed to know what everyone knew about him. And I didn't know, like Sister Lorraine, he says, she shoots a look at me, and it's a great line.
Let me say who is Sister Lorraine. It's one of the nuns.
And my soul bleeds, yeah.
Yeah.
And so does she really know, or is he just being paranoid?
I don't know. Sister Lorraine is one of the nuns who stays with the priest in this church, which I imagine is the one on 34th Street. I used to know a wonderful holy man, a Franciscan friar, who stayed there. That's why I know very well that place. And this woman, Sister Lorraine, is the only one who sort of understands what's going on, that this priest has a mistress. And then there is another woman who sees him with the girl in a restaurant or at the movies and starts writing letters. You should be ashamed. And this is a book about shame. Because when you have huge ambitions, when you want to be an angel and you understand that you're just made of flesh, it's a tragedy.
But isn't it, I was interested in the idea of absolution, and actually maybe, Jim, you're the boss of this.
He's the boss of that.
Maybe you're the boss of this, which is, I mean, if you are confessing sins that you intend to commit, no, I'm asking. No, I don't know. I've only been a Catholic for like 5 minutes. I wasn't born Catholic. I'm not a victim. I'm a volunteer. So I don't know all the rules and stuff.
Nobody was born Catholic, Mary.
Well, they get you pretty soon.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, that was my question too. How intent that ran through the book? How intent is he? Is he intent?
You
is
see,
he
Jesuits,
open?
he didn't answer.
Oh, and I'm about to answer.
Okay.
Is he intent on changing? Because when you go to confession, you have to have, as they say, a firm purpose of amendment. And one of the questions is, if someone comes into the confessional and says, I've stolen and I'm doing it again, can you really absolve them if they don't have if they don't intend to not do it? And I was wondering that about this guy, about Father Abram, if he
because
is,
Father Jorge is absolving him.
Mm-hmm.
His confessor, the kind of holy guy from Colombia, very earnest, doctrinaire kind of fella. he goes on absolving him. Is that accurate? Would that happen?
It depends on the priest, I think, and what the priest determines or how the priest understands the person's desire. Usually you err on the side of, obviously, forgiveness and mercy. If someone comes in and actually says, I'm just going to do this again, you have to say, why are you in confession? If someone says, I'm going to try, obviously, Jesus is about mercy, and so that's what you try to model. But I was just curious in the guy's heart, is this something that he's trying to overcome or move past? Or that was the open question as I read the book, which made it interesting because it's not just black and white. You wonder about the guy.
He tries all the time, and he fails. As you certainly remember, Samuel Beckett used to say, try again, fail better.
Yeah, but that works better for writing than it does with sex.
It's not. When the book came out in Italy, among the presenters there was another Jesuit friend who is a mutual friend. Antonio Spadaro is the editor-in-chief of Civiltà Cattolica. He told me that in public that I should have called the book not the Unworthy. In Italy it's called The Unworthy with the article, but The Inept.
Because
it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tougher than you. That's why I come to you.
Yeah. I found him it was very realistic. I also was amazed by the realism of the other two priests. And are they based on, you don't have to name people, but are they just
No, they're not
types?
based. No. There are a few characters in the book who are based, or they're literally those people. But no, all the priests are completely invented. And one of the recurring ideas of this saga is that in the foreground you have invented characters such as Abram Singer. In the background you meet real people like Muhammad Ali. In the new one you have George Bush father or Richard Nixon or other politicians.
And you have the Twin Towers going up, and you sort of have all of New York assembling itself around you.
Because before becoming a priest, I imagined that he was a workman. He had worked in the building of the Twin Tower. Of course, understanding that this was last forever.
And you always knew you were going to do this are the other books in first person?
Yes, with the exception of the first one. The first one whose title is L'America non esiste, America does not exist, which is a line from Henry Miller, one of my other heroes, and a lot of sex.
You like the sexy ones, yeah,
Yes,
I see that.
I do. And
you're Italian, I notice.
An Italian Catholic. Let me put this way. A Southern Italian Catholic.
That's it.
With the exception of that one, all the other books, the other 6, are in first person. And still Father Spadaro said, why are you doing this? I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe it is not. I don't know.
Now, is this the 7 deadly sins, or?
No. Although in the new one, I deal with fake news. Do you count it as a sin? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let's not go there tonight, but maybe next year we'll do something on the.
No, we went there last night.
Yes, we did. When Stefano told me that he was screening a clip, I was sure that he would screen a film that is based on probably the greatest novel ever written on a priest, which I think is The Power and the Glory by Graham Greene. The title of the film is The Fugitive by John Ford. Not a great John Ford, but still a John Ford, which is, can we say?
John Wayne, isn't it?
No, Henry Fonda. I don't know if you know the film. Again, I think John Ford is one of the greatest directors of all times. That is not his best film, but it's interesting because it's him dealing with fate, and he not always does it. Maybe in Three Godfathers and few others. But I was sure that Stefano would screen that film. Why I'm saying this? Because I was so sure until the day that I went back to my Graham Greene reading, and I found this line that I want to read. Because it says everything about this book. And this is not from Graham Greene, Power and the Glory, but from another great book of his called The Heart of the Matter. Here, when you say here, the book is set in Africa. Here, you could love human beings as God loved them, knowing their worst. So only if you love someone knowing his or her worst, you really love him or her. And God does it.
That's so moving.
I don't know if it's moving, but
It
this
is
is to
for me.
thank you.
It
But
is- it is
Graham
for
Greene
me.
was a great writer. Can we say something nasty about Nobel Prize?
About the Nobel Prize?
Yes.
I haven't won it yet. I don't
Yeah,
know.
okay.
I don't.
Let's go there for
I don't
1
think I
minute.
get. I don't think I
1
get to
minute of
have an
nasty things
opinion.
about Nobel Prize. Can we?
I'm sorry.
How is that possible that Graham Greene never was awarded? How is possible that Philip Roth was never awarded? How is possible that Jorge Luis Borges, Vladimir Nabokov, and I can count now 20 names.
And even some girls.
Yeah, well, Flannery O'Connor. Flannery O'Connor.
Thank you.
Flannery O'Connor was never. I don't remember if Marguerite Yourcenar won a Nobel Prize. I don't remember. Maybe she did, but she definitely deserves it. How is that possible? How ridiculous is this?
I don't want to talk about the Nobel Prize.
Okay, we go.
I want to come back to Unworthy. He also talks about. I mean, it's also a book that deals with death and people sort of staring into the abyss. And I think certainly the book begins with him thinking he's going to kill himself, and then he has this call. Is he a normal sinner? That's what I want to know. Is he a normal? Is he?
I don't
is
know
he
what
just
is a normal
No, but you
sinner.
know, just a brand X type sinner. You know, I'm not going to steal from the collection plate. I'm not going to break my vow of chastity this week, and then one goes on any old way. No, but I mean, again,
I would define him as a man, a young man, who understands to be very weak and frail, and very mediocre, maybe inept, as Father Spadaro would say. And this makes him a normal sinner. Every sinner is normal, if you want, because if you believe in sin, of course. Maybe you don't want to speak about the Nobel, but I want to speak about the Pope. Can I, for 10 seconds?
nothing our brother talk about.
Okay. I am a huge admirer of this Pope. And in his first interview, given to Father Spadaro, incidentally, Father Spadaro asked him as a first question, how would you define yourself? That was the question. And his answer was a sinner. So I think this makes him even greater. And I am not comparing myself to the Pope, but I'm definitely a much bigger sinner than the Pope.
And yet, actually, the second part of the quote is a sinner who is loved by God.
Yes.
Which is a very Jesuit way of looking at it. We call it the love sinner. And so he is this way in the book. And you can see him struggling. I mean, I felt sorry for this guy. You know, if this guy,
I felt sorry
I've
too.
known people in this situation. And it's, your heart goes out to them. One of the people that we haven't talked about, you mentioned the girls, is Lisa. And one of the questions I want to ask as a priest is something that we are always told, when these situations come up, which is, sometimes in people's lives. What about her? In the sense, we are always told when these situations happen that there's another person in the equation and you are misleading her. And I'm wondering if there was if you felt that he, without giving away too much, is misleading her because he's clearly not thinking of leaving the priesthood, and yet he's do you feel like he's stringing her along, or what do you think?
I'm afraid I have to spoil a few things. I wrote this book when my sister was very ill, and she eventually died. So the description of her illness is basically the description of my sister's illness. And this tie the two lovers even more. And there is a moment where the sexual love ends and it becomes something much bigger. So I don't know if Lisa well defined, but definitely she's a positive character. And I don't want to give too much, but she's, in my opinion, much closer to God than he is.
I mean, she's more, as I see it, she's more pure.
Absolutely, she is.
And she I would say she is more, in a sense, sinned against. I mean, because he's, in a way, he's kind of, he loves her, but also because he's not leaving and he's not making a commitment to her, which does change in the book when she gets ill. It's almost a kind of, using of her, So I saw him as...
But who's using who in that?
Yeah. I just saw him as a little selfish in terms of getting what he wanted from her.
Oh, he's completely selfish.
Right. Well, I'm trying to be
Completely,
polite.
Yeah. No, no. Inept and selfish. And he loves the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is not a secret that they can spoil.
I also love the moment when he goes to the bishop. I'm going to do a spoiler alert. You guys will all forget this. It'll be siphoned from your mind the minute you walk out the door. But he goes to he assumes that this woman who's calling him and tormenting him and saying you should be ashamed of himself, she says she's going to write letters to the bishop. So he goes to confess before he can get busted. And to me, that was the obviously what's going on with Lisa's illness was tremendously moving in his moral quandary. But he goes to the bishop, and the minute he gets there, says a wonderful thing and a terrible thing. He says, "I don't believe in God anymore," which is something I think everybody feels. I mean, I would assume even religious feel that. I mean, I would assume that happens. So
absolutely, there are saints.
Yeah, but
who
Mother
didn't believe in
Teresa,
God. Mother Teresa.
who heard, it was in an arid place for what?
For several years.
50 years.
50.
Years and years and years.
Yeah.
It was decades, yeah.
You reminded me, a year ago or so, this Pope was talking with young kids. And a kid, 8 years old or 9, asked him, "Do you believe in God?" to the Pope. And the Pope answered was, "I don't know, but I know that he does believe in me."
Very Jesuit answer.
Of course. I was raised by the...
Gendered answer?
No,
Jesuit
Jesuit.
answer.
Oh,
Jesuit.
Jesuit answer.
But I think it's the right one.
Does this guy have a sequel? That's also what I wondered. I mean, I could see this guy. I could see this guy coming back and you've got 10 of these to write. I can see this guy making yeah, I mean, you know.
He will reappear.
We had Terminator 2.
He will
I
reappear.
can see this guy as a very, because of what he went through, as a very compassionate parish priest, you know, who helps people who struggle with these things. And you know, it's funny as you say that. I know a lot of priests in the city who are that kind of person who understands human frailty. And those are the people that you go to, not someone who's perfect and who's never sinned, but the person who understands human frailty. So I could see this person. This is someone I would want to go to for confession or spiritual
Would you?
direction.
So you really
Actually,
look for the most sinful priest with the long. Is
Well-
it? So when you see the big long line,
Yeah.
is that what it means
Well,
about
I think it's
that guy?
guys, you know, I think it's people that have understood their own limitations, their own need for God, basically, their own reliance on God, that they're not doing it all themselves. And that you don't want to go. That's why it's very hard sometimes to go to someone who's super young, because they haven't had a lot of experience and they haven't discovered their need for God yet. And you want to go to someone like that who understands humanity, basically. And so that's the image.
And suffering and human
suffering and especially this kind of humanity.
Right.
The
That's
person-
morally complicated.
Yeah, and I think right, and he's wiser by the end of the book. He's learned a lot about himself, about love, about God, about forgiveness, about the church, about women, and so he's a wiser and probably better confessor by the end of the book.
At the end of the book, there is a scene which is completely stolen from a film.
Oh,
And
what film?
Do you want me to say everything?
Yeah.
Okay. The film is called Life Lessons. It's directed by Martin Scorsese, and it's about a painter. Have you seen this film? It's
I've
from
never
New York
seen this.
Stories. It's an episode from New York Stories. It's one of Martin Scorsese's best film, I think. And I sent the book to Martin Scorsese, and he told me, "You stole that scene from me immediately." And the answer was yes. And someone told me that I think Picasso said that mediocre imitate, correct me if I'm wrong, the good ones steal. Is that right? Something like that. I don't know if I'm good, but I stole completely a scene from Scorsese.
And you're not going to tell us which. Oh well, we have to watch.
No, because it's the very end of the book.
Oh,
The
there we
very
go.
final scene.
Did you ever consider? I know you didn't consider doing it in third person. It is such an, and the book feels intimate. Did you ever consider? I kept thinking of Graham Greene's End of the Affair. I don't know how many of
There
you
was
have
also a film with, I think, Ray Fiennes and Julianne Moore.
right.
Yeah.
Book's better. But
Of course, the book's better.
But where a woman prays that her lover lives and agrees, it sort of cuts a deal with God. If you let him live through this bombing strike there in London during the war, then I will not sleep with him anymore. I won't see him again, and I'll sort of go on. Did you ever consider having him renounce her?
Of course not. No, he's not able. He's not able.
You just say that
he
with
tries,
such
he
a light.
tries.
I didn't try that hard. I mean, he doesn't. I don't see him
That's
like.
why he's inept.
Well, see, that was my question. Is he trying? Is he trying hard? I got the sense that he was. Yeah, he's struggling, but is he taking steps to actually? I mean, I'm sounding like a spiritual, like a confessor now.
The story becomes
I would
worse
say,
and worse and worse.
Are you taking steps to distance yourself, or are you thinking of leaving the priesthood? Does that ever cross his mind?
He loves Jesus. He loves the church.
Yeah.
A few minutes ago, I was interviewed and thank to the journalist, and he asked me what this book is about, which is what I always ask to my students, what the film is about. And I say it's 3 love stories. The first one is between this priest and a woman. The second one is between this priest and the church. The third one is between me and New York. So this is what the book is about, basically. And since you mentioned Grant Green, but I'll go back to your question. I do not love very much End of the Affair, honestly. I prefer Heart of the Matter. I prefer Power and the Glory. Because
I love Brighton Rock, too.
I mean, he's one of the great writers of the 20th century. But this book, my book, is most of the time a monologue. It's a meditation. It's a self-lacerating meditation. I say, I'm a sinner, I'm doing this, and he narrates a few stories. And Grant Green used to say that there is a moment where a monologue becomes a discussion. Sooner or later becomes a discussion. Sooner or later this book becomes a confrontation, because you cannot be there ruminating and just self-lacerating yourself. So, to go back to your question, yes, of course he tries. He tries and tries and tries. I don't think he's able to break that.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the book as one long prayer. That was my
It's
sense.
a prayer.
I
And
love
if you
that.
don't
I
mind,
love
it is
that.
a prayer. And this is the way I see it. And by the way, since you read that part, which is sort of a blasphemous prayer, I don't know if I'm right on this. I call you an expert here.
Are there blasphemous prayers?
Yes, no, this is exactly my point. One of the most blasphemous and purest and most beautiful prayers of all time, I think, is what Job says against God. That's a prayer. He's upset because he say, I'm good, I'm probably the best you ever had, and you're doing this to me. I'm summarizing here. The Bible is a little bit better than me. But he's upset with God. And I don't see it as a blasphemy, but as a prayer.
Yeah, it's honest. I mean, I think God wants us to be honest. And, you see that in the Gospels. Jesus is honest with the Father. People are honest with Jesus. I was just reading the story of Lazarus when Mary and Martha, when you remember the story, Jesus comes to raise Lazarus from the dead. The sisters of Lazarus, Mary and Martha and Bethany, come out, and they say, if you had been here, our brother would not have been dead. They're very blunt with Jesus. And it's
Where were
they're
you?
pissed.
They're upset.
And it's the same Martha who says when her sister Mary is just not doing much work and sitting at Jesus' feet, tell her to help me, to Jesus. I mean, who the heck says to Jesus, tell her to help me?
Get up off her butt and help me.
Yeah. And so one of the insights I think of that story is the sort of call to honesty with God in prayer, which is what Job does and which is what he does, which I think is better than any sort of made up prayer. Just
But
being honest.
Antonio, how is that blasphemy? I want to say, I really, because
Apparently, I'm saying that it's not blasphemy at all. I think it's another form of praying. And if you don't mind, at the
but
very
the
end, I read
Psalms are
another
full of
passage
it.
where he...
The Psalms are full of that, of people.
I always tell people, look, even if you're even if you're cursing God and angry at God, and we certainly get angry at God, first of all, God can handle it. God's been handling it since the Psalms and Job. And it's better than not being in a relationship with God. You're still in relationship. You're still talking. The lines of communication are still open. That's why that for me, the most powerful parts of the book were his internal monologue to God.
And there is a lot of complaining about Jesus in the gospel. For example, in the wedding of Cana, the mother Mary say, "Why don't you do something?" You know,
And he says, woman.
woman.
Very
Yes.
strong.
Woman.
No, he doesn't say like
He does.
that.
Yeah, I think
but
he
not
does.
like that.
I think
Well,
he
let me
does.
tell you, here's a little digression.
Sure he does.
Little digression. So, believe it or not, in Greek, the words that Jesus says to his mother Mary at the wedding at Cana, which is "ti hamen kai su," which is "what have you to do with me," are the same words that the demon says to Jesus in the synagogue. What have you to do with me? So they're very harsh. Like, who are you to me, basically? So yeah, people and the disciples complain about Jesus, and everybody complains about Jesus.
Yeah.
So he's
Yeah,
used
he's
to
wandering off,
well,
and
he's-
you know, and
God's used to hearing our complaints.
And
thank
since we're
God.
talking about great Catholic writers, Chesterton once wrote an essay where he pointed out that Jesus could have chosen as the leader of the church a warrior like St. Paul, or an intellectual like Luke, or a pious, genial man like John. And instead, he picked someone who would repudiate and betray him, like Peter,
A sinner.
a sinner. So the greatness of the church is based on sin, on a sinner, which is scandalous maybe, but this is the beauty of it.
It is kind of Manichaean, I think. If to go back to St. Augustine, though, to say that you know, there is no good without evil, but certainly we all know that.
Don't become heretic now.
That's what I said in my interview. I can't read it. It's in Italian. I said, just cut out the heretical stuff. Never mind. I'm not.
No, I was going to say, well, I think that's a good point, because the sinner understands his reliance on God, whereas the perfect person wouldn't need that. And Peter understands, having sinned several times, you know, in the Gospels, understands who is in charge, whose forgiveness he depends upon, and that's he's a better leader.
It's like the confessor with the long line.
Well, and the other great line is Richard Rohr, the Franciscan spiritual director, says that Peter shows us that we often come to God not by doing right, but by doing wrong, like Peter.
We mostly don't go when we're, you know, skipping down the road with our fishing pole over the shoulder, right?
No.
No, if you don't mind, I would like to end by reading another prayer,
Yes,
apparently
please.
blasphemous,
Please.
unless you want to ask something
No,
else.
please.
This is almost in the middle of the book. Hold on one second. Chapter 13, where is it? And it's another moment where the priest is very upset, basically, with God, because he doesn't know how to solve this problem, and he doesn't want to leave Lisa. And that's his prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, you have asked us to be in the world, but not of the world. But then you want us humble, insignificant, defeated. You wanted warriors like St. Paul and St. Ignatius. You exalted them and allowed them to enrich your church. But you continually remind us that the blessed ones are the poor in spirit, and the last shall be first. Our Father, if I didn't love you, I would hate you deeply. And maybe sometimes I do, because I know you love me even at such moments. Father, who sacrificed your Son, Father, who made yourself flesh and felt that all flesh desires and demands, Father of sinners and murderers, Father of failures and traitors, Father of my Father, whom you saw making love to my mother and conceiving this unworthy body of mine. This is a passage of the book that says, I think, what the book is about. So, if you don't have any questions, yes.
I have my own interpretation of this.
Yes.
I didn't know what yours would be. Why did you give him a Jewish name?
Okay. In the first book of the saga called America non esiste, the protagonist is a woman, an Italian woman, her name Maria, who falls in love with a Jewish character. His name is Nathan, based on a writer who's a friend of mine. Even the description is exactly like him. And I mean, no, Englander, Nathan Englander, and she gets pregnant, and he disappears. Probably he dies. She wants to give his name to her child, but he is raised Catholic, so he has a Jewish name, but he's a Catholic guy, and then he becomes a priest. And of course, this is a joke for all his friends at the seminar. They call him the Jewish priest. So if you don't know the first book, it sounds strange that his name is Abram Singer. Yes, I understand that. He's the one who doesn't believe in the devil, so beware. But he's also a dear friend. Mike.
And I want to clarify something about this. I studied theology at Gregorian University. That's why I don't believe in the devil. That's with the Jesuit, my wonderful Karl Rahner professor. In this way, that's why I don't believe in the devil. I think the devil is an excuse that the humanity.
Franco, a little bit closer with the microphone.
I said, coming from Gregorian University, it's the Magna, it's the Harvard of a Catholic Church. The Jesuits are wonderful; they teach us a lot. And Karl Rahner always told us, be careful, if you want to be a good theologian, you don't have to believe in God, because otherwise you will be not a good theologian. That was wonderful what my professor said. This way, I admire Antonio very, very much for his book. But one thing that I want to clarify, if it's possible, the parish priest, they do not make vow of chastity. They make vow of celibacy. This way, celibacy is different from chastity.
I think it's better if he responds on this.
Yeah, you went to school at the Gregorian University. You have theology from Gregorian University. No, I'm so sorry. I beat you on this. This is why I know much better than anybody else. But this is very important to understand, because we study in the morale course. Chastity is one thing, celibacy is another thing. Okay. Celibacy means do not get married. That's celibacy for the priest. Chastity is different, and the priest can have sin, have a relationship, sexual relationship, that goes to confess, and it's okay. That's very important to understand.
It's a little bit more complicated than it's okay.
It's not complicated that. If you know well the theology, you don't complicate the things. It's not complicated. It's very clear.
I prefer that Father Martin responds.
So that's correct. So priests at their ordination make a promise of celibacy. That's accurate.
Yes.
A priest.
Not chastity.
Correct. A member of a religious order.
The religious make the vow.
Let him answer, Franco.
The religious, but not the parish priest. And in the book, the guy is a parish priest.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So a religious makes...
Make my point.
Correct. So a religious makes a vow of chastity. In reality, in the way that they're lived out, you're right, and you're correct. Celibacy means not getting married, and chastity is the right use of our sexuality. And so for someone who is not married in the Catholic viewpoint, the right use of their sexuality is this life of chastity. For the person in a religious order, you also vow chastity, which means not getting married. But the point is, I think, for the book, in the way that they are both lived out, it is the same. Well, okay. Okay. So I would say that...
Franco, you should listen to.
Well, right. So, sure. So you could say that in the same in married life, we have married people who sometimes break their promises and their vows, and they're still married, right? And so, but the goal is for the priest and for the religious, celibacy in one case, chastity in the other. In a sense, they are lived out by the religious priest and the diocesan priest in the same way. Yeah, yeah.
Grazie. I think we can go. Okay. First, yes. Hold on. No, why don't you say this? Okay. I want to thank, first of all, Mary, Father Martin, and Professor Albertini.